Thank you very much, Angela, Katia, Mary. Thank you, guys. And welcome, Dr. Rebecca. Good to see you. Ed, take it away.
Thank you, Tony. I've lived a life of transition. I continue to live a life. I'm 71 years old, and just in the last several months, I've moved back to my hometown after being away for 53 years. Just ponder that for a minute. It's changed a lot, but there's a lot that hasn't changed. And one of the first Sundays I was back, I went to church, and I looked over there, and they were neighbors of mine from when I was growing up, and they were adults then. And I went over to them. They looked like they were my age now, and I said, "How are you all doing?" And they said, "Great, we're so glad to see you." And turns out they're 96 years old. They're really doing well. They're so involved in the community. And I'm thinking, gosh, to be able to go through all of life and do all these things in life, and to go through all the changes of life, and at 96 still be able to be involved with so many different things. It's just a fantastic thing, and it may be what I wanted to, it's what I want to be. I would also say I get bored really easily, so that's probably why I change so much. And I'm interested in a lot of different things. Every one of you I'd love to have a conversation with, because you have something to say that has real value, and would be interested to learn that. So, I welcome your interaction with me after all this is done, and if you'd like to have a conversation, I'd be glad to do that. So I see transition as the natural state of our lives. I don't see not having change as natural. I see that as some kind of interruption of the transitions or growth that we go through. And so it's one of the challenges we have, is that when we go through these transitions in life, we're put into a position where we have to respond, we have to adapt. And oftentimes we're put into situations where we're being kind of required to adapt in a way that's difficult, and we're not sure that we have what it takes to make the changes that we need to make. I mean, I talk with people all the time who find themselves out of a job. They were, quote, redundant, meaning they were determined that there was too many of that kind of person. I just had an email from a friend in Australia that this is what he's gone through. He's now redundant, and he's really having a hard time dealing with that change. And I said, well, let's talk about this, because somewhere embedded in that change is a gift, and that gift is an opportunity to see another side of you, or to do something else, to stretch your capacity to be a person of impact. I mean, that's, I think, one of the things that comes with change, is that it's not just a negative thing, or it doesn't even have to be a negative thing. Could it be very positive, because, okay, now I have a chance to go express something that I have not been able to, because the circumstances I was in inhibited me or limited me from being able to fully express the things that I love and want to have a part of my life in a much more full way. So I see transition as necessary. I see it as healthy, but I also recognize that many of the transitions that we face are thrust upon us unaware, where we're unprepared for the change that we're being asked to take on. And those are the situations that we have to go through and have to deal with that. So I just want to make a suggestion for three little things, and I want you to see this through the lens of my circle of impact model. So when we think about change, we're thinking about maybe the change of the way we think. change of our ideas. We're finding that, I didn't really like the job I was in. There were things about it I liked, but I didn't like the whole job, and I want to do something different. So where do I start with that? Well, I think it begins partly with, what is it that I value? What is it I value about working? Do I like working with people, or do I like working kind of alone? Do I like working in an office, or do I like working remotely? Do I like having to make um, uh, initiation towards people, or do I like to respond to people? These are kind of value statements of things that kind of define who we are and where we're comfortable. And oftentimes we take a job where we're thrust into situations where we're not comfortable, and we find that actually we're pretty good at taking initiative to establish a new connection with someone. Second thing is, we need to really be clear about our purpose. So if we don't have a clear purpose, and we just take whatever job is there, well, we may find that we're just not happy with that. So my point here is that if we're really clear about purpose, not the purpose of work, but the purposes of our lives, then we will look for and be open to hearing about situations where we can walk into that situation and express ourselves purposefully in a way that we couldn't before. Now, I'll give you an example. I went to seminary and I became a minister, and I did that because I like people, and I love God, and I wanted to serve God's people. But what I found was my purpose is also about creating change, and churches weren't interested in creating change. They wanted someone to come in and stabilize things and make everybody feel comfortable. We don't want change here. So, and I said, oh, so I really don't belong in this structure. So here's where structure comes in. I need a different structure. I need a place where I can talk with people who actually want to change, actually want to grow. And so I found myself in my next job in a university, in a college, where I was teaching, and I was doing a leadership program, and I was a chaplain to the students. So there, the students were there to learn, they were there to grow, they were there to change, and therefore my purpose in working with them was met. But then the structure there didn't allow me to change the situation enough. So I went and started my own business. But in reality, for me, the thing which is the greatest source of my life and where change matters the most is in my relationships with people. Because I want to establish relationships where I help people identify, well, who am I, and what can I do, and do I have what it takes to take this step, which seems so daunting and so difficult? Can I make this transition to become a different person than my family ever thought I could be? But somewhere down deep inside of me, I feel that that kind of person is there. I was once told that, well, you believe in us so we can believe in ourselves. And I said, that's exactly right. I believe that everyone can change and go through transitions. They can grow. They become persons of impact if they just decide that they're willing to be uncomfortable enough to grow. So there's a level of uncomfortableness about becoming a different person. What I found was, in my relationships, there are a lot of people who liked me as I used to be, but as I was growing and becoming a different person, they didn't really care about me anymore. And so I found that my relationships, my social life was changing, and I had to kind of accept that. But as I was accepting that, I found other people that I could be in relationship with, and they were much more like me, and our relationships became much deeper, more meaningful. We share the same values. In many cases, we share the same purpose. And so then, as friends and as colleagues, we had a vision that we shared together. We had a vision for how we together could have an impact in the world. In many ways, Tony and I have that kind of relationship. He lives in Kenya. I live in America. We have different worlds that we flow through, and yet we are very, very symbiotic in the way we see the world and to see the work that we do. And so there's an example there that could be an example for you with the people that you know. So what we're asking the question is, how should I be thinking about my life? What kind of relationships do I actually need to be able to go through the changes that I must go through to grow to be a person who really has something to offer to the world? And then what kind of structure, what kind of business structure or work structure or social structure do I need to be at my very best all the time, where I can not only find support for me being who I want to be, but I can also be in a place where I can help others to do the same. So that's kind of a way I see us being able to go through personal change and go through the personal transitions that we need to go through in order to become the best person that we can be. And anybody who would tell me today, well, I've already reached that point, I am the best person, I will never be any better than I am today, they're kidding themselves. Because what I believe is each one of us is endowed with tremendous amount of potential, and that potential is unlimited. And what I mean by that is if you decide that you're going to grow and be a person of impact all the way through the end of your life, then you'll see that your potential as a person will continually be manifested after you've gone. Because your impact upon people will be, they too will see themselves as growing. They too will see that that transition is a part of their life. So I also see that there is another way of looking at this that I think is important. And this really is much kind of more of a kind of an abstract or a framework in which to talk about this. I see that change or these transitions, understand these transitions, is something that happens in time and space. It happens over time in a sequence of moments, a sequence of events, and over time we will see ourselves changing. And if you were to keep a journal, a daily journal or a weekly journal of things that you see taking place in your life, a phrase here, a sentence there, a paragraph, things that are just ways of kind of acknowledging that, well, this was an interesting moment. I learned something from that. Or this was a milestone because I was finally able to convince this person to hire me as his employer or her employee. Those moments recorded in your journal, when you go back and look at that, you can see that you have gone through a season of change in small little increments. So that's the way time impacts transition. Space, meaning the world, the physical world that we live in, is a movement through different groups and different organizational structures. I've been through, in 20 years of being a consultant, how many companies did I work with? 30, 40, 50? I don't know. But in every one of those, I had to transition into being prepared to talk with them and to work with them. And then once the work was done, I transitioned out of that into something else. And so we're constantly moving through situations. But the key is, and this goes back to the initial thing I was saying, is that we want to be the same person in all those situations. I'm going to be at Brenegar, regardless of whether you're from Kenya or Malawi or Berlin or Moscow. I'm going to be that same person. And I think it's important to feel like you can be that same person, because when you're asked to be someone different, in many cases, you're asking to compromise those values and that sense of purpose. The second thing is that oftentimes the places that we work, the institutional places, feel like they're an inhibitor on us being the person that we want to be, or being able to fulfill the opportunities that we have. And in many cases, that's exactly right. Institutions do inhibit us because they have a certain thing they want us to do, and that's what we want you to do. I once met a man who was a welder, and this was in Salt Lake City, Utah. He came into a book event that I was having, I was signing books, and he walked up to me and I said, good gosh, he was this huge guy. And I said, so what do you do? And he says, I'm a welder. I work for one of the mining companies. He says, wow, that's really interesting. He says, so how do you like being a welder? He says, well, I like being a welder, but I'd like to do more. And I keep asking the company, let me do more. And they won't let me do more. I said, well, why don't you do something outside the company? Why don't you go to school and learn how to fabricate metal? Then you can take your metal fabrication skills and your welding skills, and you could create works of public art that people would buy to put on, on the curb of their building or something like that. And he looked at me like, oh my goodness, I would have never thought of that. And the thought of him, here, this welder, this big, rough, tough guy, being an artist was just so pleasing to him. So sometimes the institutions are an inhibitor to us really discovering who we want to be. But then sometimes they provide us the opportunity to grow and to expand, and we find that, oh, this is really the thing I love, and this is the thing I want to be. So there's either something inhibiting us or something liberating us within the institutional structures of our lives. And then the last thing I want to say is that the transitions that we go through as just human beings or persons is those transitions are typically ones of self-awareness. You go into a situation and you go through maybe a conflict with a boss, or a conflict with an employee, or maybe there's a conflict in your family, and you don't know why it's happened, and you step back and you reflect upon it, and then you realize that something had changed in the relationship, something had changed in the structure of that situation. And now I am aware of who I am in a way that I never was before. And so our self-awareness leads to, oh, I'm not really this kind of person. My identity is something very different. I can go do other things. I don't belong let's say, I don't belong as an accountant or a bookkeeper in this business. I really should be off selling things because I really like the interaction I have with our customers. How can I put myself into a relationship with our customers where I love talking with them and talking with them about how our company, can service them? So that's a change, that's a self-awareness change that leads to an identity change. And from that, we discover fulfillment. So I see that this whole notion of transition is often sold to us as this hard, disruptive thing to avoid, when it really is, when we embrace it for what it truly is the pathway to fulfillment and being persons of impact, and really to be the people that our societies need today, which is what I would call a leader. So there you go. I hope that helps you understand transitions. But what questions do you have? Because maybe all that I've said just doesn't make any sense to you. Maybe you need to ask the question, well, what about this? Or what about that? And I think there are no bad questions except the questions that's not asked. So ask your question and let's have some conversation.
Linda, transition is a pathway to fulfillment. Love it. So they're acknowledging that part that you said that change is the pathway to fulfillment.
Well, let me ask them a question. What do you see as fulfillment? How do you define that word?
Okay, maybe I could go. This is Linda. For me, fulfillment is contentment, and it's based on my perception, not on the perception of anyone, but just being fulfilled at what I have achieved, what I've done. Yeah, so it's more of intrinsic, not based on what people feel or think. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, I agree with you.
I think for me, fulfillment is the thing that you would want to do if everything was going wrong. So for me, it's a sense of achievement, but not dictated by external factors. So I equate it also to a sense of inner peace. But like Linda said, I think for me, it can be very subjective because everyone determines. I mean, in terms of the achievement, I mean, that could be identified by everyone, but the how is different for each person. That's the way I see it.
Okay, let me ask another question. Is fulfillment something that you can have over and over again in many situations? Or is fulfillment the goal of your life that you were seeking to find at the end of your life?
I think for me, it's many parts to a whole. I don't see it as the end of life is where you find fulfillment. I think as every transition happens, as everything is happening in life, there will be, I mean, I actually feel like it would be quite depressing to wait till the end to find fulfillment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's there's different small moments as you go along life. But you could say that they all build to this, I guess, greater purpose or fulfillment in the whole of it. But yeah, little at a time.
Well, let me say this, because what you've just described to us is a picture of a transition that has taken place in my lifetime. Because when I was a child, my father, you know, he had a job that he worked at the same place his entire career, and they didn't talk about fulfillment in the daily sense of it. You know, the fulfillment came at the end of your career when you retired and you went off to stick your feet up on the deck chair at the beach, and that's what fulfillment was. But I think what you're helping us to see is that now we see fulfillment as something that's more momentary, in the moment, and I think that's a really good thing, because it helps us stay in touch with the things that are really valuable to us. And so I mean, when we're done today, I will have had a great sense of fulfillment because of what I've been able to do with you all today. So thank you.
And I just want to echo what Ed and Nyambura have said, just going back to the discussion that Ed led us about transitions being a moment of self-aware.
Mhm.
That it speaks about being present. So it just brings out that issue of just being present and being fulfilled for that particular, being present and being fulfilled at that particular time, and not waiting for I don't know, retirement or whatever, because as we said, it's continuous and it keeps building you, just to make yourself better. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's great. I mean, I'm at a retirement age. I could go off and do nothing, but I'm not retiring. I'm moving forward. And I'm going to keep. I am going to continue to change. I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. I hope I'm not the same person in 2 years that I am today. That's how significant I see this. And it comes,
Yeah.
all of this really becomes because of the interaction I have with people like you all, like Tony, like so many other people there in Africa, but also people here in my neighborhood and people, you know, that I've known over the years. So That's how I am applying this in the real world for me.
Thank you, Ed. And Ed likes to talk about the third half of life, and Ed is one of the people who has made me believe that the best days are ahead of us, so that we can be even more productive and have impact as we continue going.
Very true.
Yeah. So I would just want to read something. There's a question, Ed. I'll read it out for you. But before I go there, let me acknowledge Angela. Angela said that change is like rest. It is inevitable and necessary, and it ushers one to new seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there is a question there by Lauren.
Does transition go together with changing ways of doing things? That's a great question, Lauren. We change our circumstances. We change our jobs. We change where we live. We move to a different home. But there's something true about us that should not change. Because if you're constantly changing what is true of you, then you really don't know who you are. I think this is a huge issue. I'm right now working on the follow-up to this book. And the more I've thought about this, the more I realize that the challenge we have right now is that we're living in a very turbulent, disruptive, crazy, chaotic world where nothing is certain. And it has an effect upon us not feeling certain about who we are. And it makes us have the feeling that I am not capable of dealing with this. And it does, as Angela asked the question, it seems like this is scary. It is scary. Yeah, it's very scary. But being scared is not a bad thing. It's just is a way of being aware. There was a book that came out probably 25 years ago called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. And what de Becker says is that when we are afraid, like we're walking down the street and we come to a dark alley, and all of a sudden, that is awareness. That's awakening of our senses, which says, I'm looking for what's going on. I want to be more aware of what's going on. And so when we become aware like that, we're becoming aware of how I am going to function in this moment of chaos, in this moment of change. And so the more we have gone through that, and I mean, we can think about people who say, you go through military training, and they're going to put you through the hardest stuff ever, because what you're going to learn from that is what you're capable of doing. And they're going to put you in very scary, threatening situations so that when you face that in combat, you're going to be able to function as the person that you really are without just kind of becoming unraveled and becoming so fear-laden that you're unable to function at all. So yes, this chaos, all the change that we're going through is really a gift in the sense that it allows us to really know who we are and allows us to say, well, I don't really want that part of my life to be present. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person who's just always saying yes to people, for example. I want to be a person for whom a yes is a yes and a no is a no, and people can trust me because I am true to my word. I mean, but that doesn't come necessarily by reading a book. It may come because we have to go through some challenging times where we are trained to become our true selves.
Thank you very much, Ed. I hope, Lawrence, that suffices. There's another one, Ed, by Angela. Angela added one more question at the end. You see that one?
Well, it's important to know what brings you joy. It's important to be able to walk away to that joyful place. And sometimes it's, if you can play a musical instrument, that's a place of respite where you leave the chaos. You could go play your flute or your piano or your guitar, and you can sing to yourself, and all of a sudden you're in a totally different world. So finding places, some people find it in going to the gym and working out, or running, or playing some kind of game. Some people find it in hiking, or something that you do that is very different than the things that actually bring the chaos to your life. Yeah, I was up in the middle of the night last night waiting, and it was so peaceful. And now let me back up and come at this a different way. The fact that you're in a hard situation or a confusing situation may be because you have the resources to solve the hardness and the confusion that exists there. You may be the catalyst for change. And you might not know that until you give yourself to the conversations that need to happen to help alleviate that. So there's the pulling away, but there's also the immersion, the jumping in and saying, come what may, I'm going to be a person who may solve this. And sometimes that's the right thing, and sometimes it may not be the right thing. It may be the wrong thing, but you don't know until you try. I don't encourage you to go look for trouble. Don't go look for trouble. Trouble will find you. I don't go look for hardship, because hardship will find you. But I do say that do not fear it. Know that it is hard. It will be hard, that life has hard moments, and yet you can get through it. And sometimes this is where we have to call on people that we know to come join us in helping us get through these hard moments. And so we need those people that we can talk to. And, so that, I think that's also an aspect of this. Hope that helps.
I hope so too. I'm seeing a thumbs up from Mary, so I think it does.
Thank you very much.
All right, so Ed, I'm going to ask you a question as we wait to see. Please feel free to go off mute if you want to ask a question. If you want to add your thoughts, please feel free to also do that, or raise your hand and I'll see that. I want to ask a question, Ed. And okay. In Kenya, we are witnessing a transition right now. Our young people have become very clever. They are articulating things and they are making their leaders listen. And of course, that has come with a lot of chaos, and we are in a state of, there's a bit of fear, there's a bit of trepidation, there's a bit of lack of knowledge of what's going to happen next. And I'm not asking for a political answer, but we are experiencing a transition there. And I know, because me and you have a chat and you know what's going on in Kenya, you are aware of that situation. What would you tell us as individuals, and some of us from our organizational point of view, how do we approach this transition? And how can we remain true? How can we still be self-aware in this time?
Okay, two things. The first thing is that whatever you hear is not the whole story. Unless you're in the middle of it, you never know the whole story. And even if you were in the middle of it, you still might not know the whole story. So there's more going on than you know, and there's more going on behind the scenes than you know. And so the best thing to do is listen and ponder and try to understand why it is happening, and not try to define what your response is. I mean, I think about, I had a counseling situation with some young people, this is years ago, whose parents were at odds with each other. And the parents took their frustration between each other. They express their frustration at the kids, and I knew these kids because of work that I did, and I told them, I said, I don't want to get in the middle of you and your parents, period. But I also don't want you to feel like you need to choose sides. I think the best question is to ask, why is this happening? Why is this going on? And try to keep that question open instead of trying to answer it too quickly. Why is this stuff going on in Kenya right now? And if you remain open to learning about this, then at some point you may have the opportunity to say something or to be in a place where you could be a catalyst for something good to happen. So that's the first thing, is just realize that you'll never know all that's going on behind these very public kind of crises that happens in nations. The second thing is, and this is a recommendation that I would make regardless of the situation. I think that too much of what we face in the world today is oriented around how we gain information from social media, and how our expectations of the world are formed by social media. And that part of that is to drive us into being really super aware of what's going on globally. But the problem with that is that there's nothing for us to do really if we have all that information. So my recommendation is that you find something within your world that you live in, some place to give yourself, some place to have an impact. You know, maybe it's going and working with a kid's soccer team, or maybe it's working with a school, or maybe it's working in visiting elderly people in a retirement home. Maybe it's doing maybe it's becoming a painter or taking an art course or something. Do something that is focused on your local community, where you have direct relationships with people, where you can talk to each other, where you can support each other. And I believe when you do that, then these other things, these much larger things, take on a different complexion. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, because, you know, in America, we're in the mix of a big presidential election year. And I was being asked what I thought. And I said to this person, you know, I don't really watch the news. I know what's going on because you can't avoid it, but I don't watch the news. In fact, if you don't watch the news, and if you ignore much of social media, you wouldn't even know that there's an election going on. But I do know that my neighbors over here need help. I know that one of them is moving today, and I should be across the street helping them load their truck. I do another neighbor down the street is having difficulty adjusting to her new life. I have another neighbor who I constantly talk to about how he cares for our neighborhood. You know, those are where the real effect of our lives can be had, where there's direct relationship, when we have a direct contact, the things that we can actually do. And that when we do those things, then we begin to see these larger changes as kind of less important. They may be important, but they're less important to me in my life right here on the street that I live in this town, because I'm still going to do what I got to do. I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to read some. I'm going to have breakfast. I'm going to do some work. I mean, I'm still going to do those things. But if I get overly wrapped up in things that I don't have any control over, then I lose touch with the things that I actually have control over. And that's really is founded upon the idea that we we really need to care for the people that we have direct relationships with. And when we can do that with each other, we do that in a mutual way, then the ground for change is less threatening. And actually, we're building the ground for the kinds of change that will bubble up to actually solve these bigger problems that seem very difficult to solve.
So we begin with the things that we can solve that are around us, the ones that we can influence, and slowly work our way outwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. Cynthia has a very interesting comment in chat.
I think we all go through this moment, Cynthia, where we kind of reach a dry place and we're not sure whether we should continue on. Even if it's something that we do well. And it may be that it's dry because you're tired. Maybe you've been working too hard. I don't know. I really don't know. And it may be that there's other things in your life that also make it difficult to maintain your excitement for what you do. I would step back and ask the question about what is it that I truly value? And a way to ask that question is, what are the values that I'm willing to sacrifice for? Am I willing to give up the job that I have in order to preserve this value that is important to me? That's the kind of question that I'm asking. Because I think the things that we're willing to sacrifice for are the things that we truly value. And sometimes it means that we give up the job that may pay us well, but it's not satisfying. And that the job has taught us many things. So you have many skills, you have talent, you have experience. And so it's not like you're now starting from scratch. You're moving forward. And sometimes it may take some time to make the transition. I mean, I was at a point 30 years ago, right now, almost to the day. I'm just realizing that when I was working at a college and I had my annual review meeting with the president who I worked for. And she expressed to me her disappointment in my performance. And I was really surprised. And in explaining that to me, I realized that I had lost her respect. And here I am, in my, I'm 40 years old and with a wife and 3 children. And what do I do? Because I knew it was time for me to leave. And so I didn't leave right away. We put a plan together for how we could leave there and move into something where I could work and we could have a home and we could do those sort of things. And it took us a year of planning to make that happen. And so when we moved, it was kind of it was the, let's see, let me get this right. 1, 2, 3. It was the 4th move that we had as a couple, as a husband and wife and a family, in the 13 or 14 years that we had been married. So that's a lot of moves. And so we moved to a new community and I started my own business, started my own consulting business. And we were able to do all of that for 20 years. We were rooted. And by the time those 20 years were up, our children were grown. They were out of the house. And unfortunately, our marriage had reached a point where we no longer really could work together or live together. So we went through a divorce, and she stayed in the house that we had purchased, and I moved. And during the next decade, which is we're in the middle of, I've made 4 moves, all because I'm seeking to find additional places to serve. So what I'm saying to you is that if you take the long view, you'll be able to say, I can put up with this feeling of unfulfillment or this lack of excitement for a period of time. But what I need to focus on is a plan for how I can transition to the next thing. And knowing what the next thing is then puts you in a position where you can go build the relationships. I mean, let me just give you one example. I'm in conversation with the father who is putting me in touch with his daughter, who is needing to find another job so that she can maintain her work visa here in the US. And it sounds like it's an impossible situation, because she feels like if she goes back to her country, she's starting all over. But she's a talented person. She's done good work. But she feels that way. So there's this kind of feeling of desperation about having to make some decisions right now in order to not have to leave the country. You know, my feeling is that when we become really clear about what we really want to do long term, we can begin to put the plan together so that we can make an orderly transition to that point in time, and recognize that I'm not going to be happy fully during this period of time of transition, but I have the prospects, I have the hope of that moment of joy in starting something new that will fulfill this deep desire that I have down within me to be the person that I truly want to be. I hope that makes sense to you. You know, because it really is. I think when there is pressure when we feel pressure to make a decision, I got to make this decision, but that decision is not really clear. It's best to step back and say, I'm not going to make this decision today. I may not make it tomorrow. I may not make it for another month. I may not ever make this, but let's see what I can do with what I have been given to me. And then at the same time say, well, this is where I would like to be in 2 years or 5 years.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ed. We are on top of the hour and we should be coming to a close. I have been observing the chat. I had put your website there, so if anybody would like to get in touch with you further, I put it there. I have also, I want to put this on chat. If anybody is looking for passion, the things that they love to do, and they have lost passion and things like that, because we did talk about that, and you are looking for a short course that you would like to take, we have one on our website. I'll put that there as well. It's a 5-day micro course. You can take a look at that. We're coming to a close, so I'll urge you to just stay with us a little more. Ed, do you want to speak about your book briefly before I bring this to a close?
Sure.
Yeah.
The book that he just waved before you is Circle of Impact. You have everything you need. And that book is a revision of this book. And what we did with that revision was we changed the stories to be more reflective of African situations. We've added African proverbs throughout the book, and there's an African artist who did line drawings from the book. And we've gotten very good response from people. So yeah, I encourage you to get a hold of it.
So if you want to get the book, you can contact me, ladies and gentlemen, or you can take those details. I can put you in touch with where you can get it. But that's pretty much the information that you need to get the book. Thank you very, very much for being with us, for giving us your time. We appreciate you. We wish you all the very best. Do write to us, give us feedback, let us know what you thought, and let us know what you'd like us to discuss. Ed is close to me, and he can come back again. He was here last month, so I can invite him at any time if you'd like to.
Thank you, Tony.
See him again. Yeah. So Linda, thank you. Grace, thank you. If you have no further queries, if you have no further questions, then we can bring it to a close. Thank you, Angie. I see the clap. God bless you. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Kamau. It is so good to see you. And I know that you have trouble with the internet. It is so good to see you coming back. Joyce, Ruth, thank you so much. So feel free to leave at your own pleasure. Ed and I will stay a little bit. So feel free to leave at your own pleasure. You can go off mute and say something as you go, or you can just switch off. Thank you, Mary. Great having you.